There are certain things you can say or do that will make a narcissist completely unravel, and once they lose their footing, that reaction can follow them for a very long time, sometimes shaping how they treat you for months or even years afterward. If you have spent any real time around someone like this, you already know how quickly their composure can crack, almost like watching a calm surface split open the moment the wrong pressure is applied. Their patience for frustration, criticism, failure, or being told no is almost non-existent, and what looks like a small disagreement to you can feel like a full-blown threat to them. Underneath all of it is a person who is far more fragile than they let on, no matter how commanding or self-assured they appear on the surface. The confident, superior version of themselves that they present to the world rarely lines up with who they actually are or what they have actually accomplished, and that gap between the image and the reality is exactly where the trouble begins. So even the smallest thing that exposes that gap can set off what psychologists sometimes call a narcissistic wound, a moment where the carefully built persona cracks and the person underneath it panics. In that moment, they lose their grip entirely, and whoever pointed out the flaw, even gently, usually becomes the target of their anger, regardless of how fair or well-intentioned the comment actually was. To be clear, none of this is an invitation to poke at someone just to watch them break, and doing that on purpose would not be a wise or kind thing to do to anyone. But it is worth understanding what tends to strip away the mask, because it tells you a great deal about who you are actually dealing with and what is really happening underneath their behavior. So today, we are walking through 10 things that reliably push a narcissist past their limit, one at a time, starting with the milder triggers and working our way toward the one that tends to hit hardest of all. Starting at number 10, accountability. Asking someone with narcissistic tendencies to simply own their actions is one of the quickest ways to light a fuse, and you will often see the reaction almost instantly. These are people who are notorious for refusing to admit fault, especially when the mistake in question makes them look incapable, careless, or flawed in any way that might chip away at their image. That refusal is not really about arrogance in the way it appears on the surface. It comes from a deep well of low self-worth and a self-image that could shatter under the slightest amount of pressure. To keep that collapse from happening, they lean hard into acting entitled and larger than life, almost as a form of armor. Admitting an error would crack the story they have built about being superior to everyone around them, and that story is often the only thing holding their sense of identity together. Taking responsibility puts real pressure on an ego that simply cannot absorb it without cracking, so instead they retreat into denial, excuse-making, blame, and turning the story around on someone else entirely, usually the very person who brought up the mistake in the first place. Number 9 is refusing to give them what they want right away. There is a well-known body of research on narcissism, including work by psychologists studying impulsivity across large samples, pointing to impulsive behavior as one of the defining traits of the narcissistic personality. They are wired to chase whatever feels good in the moment, rather than working toward anything long-term or delayed, and this shows up most clearly in areas connected to their ego, like status, attention, admiration, or a quick emotional high that reassures them of their own importance. It is almost as if the space between wanting something and getting it feels unbearable to them, far more unbearable than it would for someone with a steadier sense of self. So if you hold back something they believe they are owed, whether that is praise, a favor, quick agreement, or simply your time and attention in a given moment, expect real frustration and anger to follow almost instantly, often out of proportion to whatever was actually withheld. That reaction alone can tell you a lot about how thin their patience really runs underneath the surface. Number 8 is calling out their behavior in a direct way, especially when there are other people around to witness it. Narcissists cannot stand criticism, and it stings even more when that criticism happens to be completely fair and accurate. It does not register to them as constructive feedback meant to help them grow. It registers as humiliation, as a public unraveling of the image they have worked so hard to build. Psychologists who study this pattern have talked about how being confronted in front of other people can trigger a wave of shame in a narcissist that feels almost unbearable to them internally. that shame rarely stays quiet for long. It usually turns into anger, denial, blame shifting, and long-winded speeches where they somehow manage to reposition themselves as the victim of the entire situation. Even a private, gentle conversation about their selfish or passive-aggressive habits tends to go absolutely nowhere, because anything that threatens their self-image, no matter how softly it is delivered, gets shut down immediately and defensively. Number 7 is touching on the things they are actually insecure about deep down. Here is something worth sitting with. The more a narcissist leans into their grandiose self-image, the more insecure they actually become underneath that armor. They often carry quiet insecurities about their looks, their intelligence, their social standing, their financial success, or how popular and admired they are among their peers. Basically, anything that can be measured, compared, or judged by other people becomes a sensitive spot for them, because their entire sense of worth is tethered to how they appear from the outside rather than how they feel on the inside. Pointing out that they are just as flawed, ordinary, and human as anyone else can trigger a shame reaction that comes out fast, intense, and often completely disproportionate to what was actually said. Number 6 is simply refusing to argue with them at all. Narcissists tend to thrive on conflict in a way that most people find exhausting and confusing, since it seems to give them energy rather than draining it. They actually get something out of chaos and confrontation, almost like it feeds them in a way calm, stable interactions never could. Pulling you into a fight gives them exactly what they are after, which is your attention and engagement, sometimes referred to as narcissistic supply, a term that captures how much they rely on outside reactions to regulate their own sense of self. If you decline to engage with that and do not even bother explaining your reasoning for stepping back, you take away the one thing they were counting on to keep the cycle going. That alone can push them into real frustration, because the entire game only works if you agree to play along with it, and silence or calm disengagement leaves them with nothing to work against. Number 5 is suggesting they might benefit from professional help, even if you bring it up gently and with good intentions. Even a soft suggestion that a difficult narcissistic person could use therapy or counseling can trigger intense anger and defensiveness. It often opens the door to denial, blame reversal, and gaslighting almost immediately. They may flip the entire conversation and insist that you are actually the one who needs help, twisting the suggestion back onto you. They might deny that anything about their behavior warrants any concern whatsoever, or accuse you of trying to paint them as unstable or unwell, just so you can walk away from the relationship with less guilt attached to your decision. Number 4 is holding a firm boundary and refusing to bend it. Setting and keeping boundaries is one of the most effective tools against a narcissist's manipulation, but it is also one of the things that upsets them the most out of everything on this list. Narcissists generally want relationships that only work in one direction, where they receive without limit and give very little in return. They expect total freedom for themselves while expecting you to quietly tolerate them, crossing every line they want to cross over and over again. In their mind, people are closer to objects or resources to be used, useful until they are worn out and then replaced with someone new. So the moment someone actually enforces a real, consistent boundary, expect pushback, guilt trips, and attempts to make you feel unreasonable for asking for basic respect. Number 3 is the fear of losing control over the relationship itself. Narcissists hate feeling like their manipulation is slipping and that you might finally be ready to walk away or take a firm stand. In their mind, if the relationship is going to end or if limits are going to be set, they should be the one calling the shots, not you. They deeply struggle to accept that you are a full, separate person with your own feelings, your own needs, and the ability to pull away whenever you choose to. That fear often pushes them toward dishonesty or manipulation just to keep you close and compliant. Whether that looks like empty promises to change, hollow apologies that never lead anywhere, sudden bursts of affection designed to pull you back in, or even ending things themselves first just to hold on to the illusion that they were the ones steering the outcome all along. Number 2 is being left, in any form and for any reason. Narcissists have a deep aversion to feeling abandoned or rejected in a romantic relationship, even when they themselves have caused significant harm within it and have given their partner every reason to walk away. If they sense that a partner is thinking about leaving, or if a breakup starts to feel inevitable, they often react in extreme and unpredictable ways that can catch everyone around them off guard. For a narcissist, everything comes back to control, so sometimes they will end things first, purely so they can feel like they were the ones steering the outcome, rather than being on the receiving end of rejection, which to them feels like an unbearable loss of power, rather than simply the end of a relationship. And finally, number 1, the biggest trigger of all. More than anything else, a narcissist is desperate to avoid appearing vulnerable in front of anyone. Protecting that fragile ego from being seen clearly, flaws and all, is their top priority in almost every interaction. In their world, there is nothing worse than having their flaws exposed in front of other people, especially people whose opinion matters to them. That kind of exposure causes them genuine, deep psychological pain, not just embarrassment. Their reaction to even minor signs that they are not measuring up to their own self-image can look completely irrational and disproportionate to everyone watching from the outside. And this constant underlying fear of being seen as flawed is exactly what keeps them from ever learning from their mistakes or doing any real, honest inner growth over time. If you found this useful, you might like a related video we have covering similar ground in more depth. Thanks for sticking with us, and remember to walk into your day with clear eyes and a steady heart. Keep your strength up and keep moving toward the life you actually want, one honest step at a time. Now let's shift gears and look at 5 tricky questions that a narcissist will almost never be able to answer with any real honesty. The kind of questions that can hand you back a sense of control over your own story. Are you tired of feeling like someone else always has to be right, always has to have the final word in every conversation you share, no matter how small the topic or how clearly the facts point another way? Getting free of that kind of grip is not easy, and it takes real work and patience, but you are in the right place to pick up some practical, grounded tools for handling people like this in your own life. If this is your first time watching, consider subscribing so you do not miss what is coming next in this series, since we cover these patterns from a lot of different angles. Together, we can take back a little control and show these self-appointed experts that they are not actually running the show, no matter how convinced they seem to be of that fact in the moment. Let's start with the first question a narcissist tends to struggle with more than almost anything else, and it is tied directly to honesty itself. People who are deeply focused on themselves often lie constantly, even about things that are completely obvious or that never needed a lie in the first place. For anyone who values honesty and straightforward communication, this kind of behavior can feel baffling and exhausting to witness over and over again. Here is a real example that illustrates the pattern well. A mother once threw her teenage son out of the house in the middle of the night, tossing his belongings onto the front lawn without warning. The father, who was already in the middle of a divorce from this same woman, ended up taking the boy in without hesitation, but what happened afterward caught everyone involved off guard. The mother turned around and emailed the school bus company, asking them to start picking her son up from his father's house instead, acting as if nothing unusual or contradictory had taken place at all. If truth really can be stranger than fiction, then living around a narcissist takes that idea to another level entirely, one that can leave you questioning your own grip on reality. To keep it brief, let's return to that same soon-to-be ex-wife from the story above. She went ahead and filed a legal motion claiming her husband had taken their son without her consent or knowledge. The strange part is that the email she sent that very same evening completely contradicted her own legal claim, almost word for word. It is genuinely hard to believe someone could act with that level of boldness and contradiction without flinching. But here is the underlying truth worth remembering in all of this. For a narcissist, plain, unfiltered honesty acts almost like poison to their system. The moment you question their motives or point out an inconsistency, consistency. They tend to freeze up internally or scramble for an answer that protects their image. What follows is usually evasion, denial, deflection, and projection, anything at all to avoid admitting they were wrong about something. I have actually made a full separate video breaking down this exact pattern in more detail, so I know it quite well by now. What is even more fascinating is watching what happens when a narcissist gets caught in an obvious, undeniable lie. They will go to incredible, almost theatrical lengths to squirm their way out of it, and I have covered that specific behavior in another video too, if you want to dig deeper into it. The bottom line here is that a narcissist genuinely cannot handle raw, unfiltered truth, and they will use nearly any tactic available to them to dodge it entirely. Once you understand that pattern clearly, you can slowly start chipping away at their facade by feeding them small, undeniable pieces of truth over time, patiently and without expecting an easy admission. Now let's look at the second thing narcissists genuinely struggle with, which is recognizing anyone else's contribution to something good. Picture an amazing party that came together beautifully, or a brilliant idea that landed well at work and earned praise from everyone involved. Do not expect a narcissist to easily hand credit to anyone else who helped make it happen, even if that person did the majority of the actual work. Ask them directly who deserves recognition for the outcome, and it becomes almost impossible for them to name a single person besides themselves, no matter how obvious the other contributions were. The reason is simple once you understand it. They are terrified that acknowledging someone else's role will somehow dim their own spotlight and chip away at their fragile sense of importance. It works almost like a scarcity mindset pushed to an extreme, where there is only room for one person to matter in any given moment, and it has to be them every single time. This pattern runs so deep that even a simple, gentle question like "What does this person add to your life?" can leave them completely stuck and unable to answer, almost as if they cannot fully register other people as having independent value or impact of their own. It is worth remembering that full-blown narcissistic personality disorder is a more severe clinical version of this pattern, but these traits genuinely exist on a spectrum, and plenty of us see milder versions of this same behavior show up in everyday life, in co-workers, in family members, in partners. Everyone wants a bit of recognition and appreciation. That is a completely normal human need, but narcissists stretch that need into something that becomes genuinely unhealthy and corrosive to their relationships. If you work closely with someone like this, do not expect them to offer real admiration or gratitude toward others, even when it is clearly deserved. It is simply not something that comes naturally to them, no matter how much you might hope it will eventually. The third area that gives narcissists real difficulty is facing their own losses and failures honestly and without distortion. Ask them about a mistake they made or something that fell apart under their watch, and be ready for an answer that veers far from the actual truth of what happened. They tend to twist the facts, sometimes unconsciously, until the story fits neatly into their own distorted version of reality where they remain blameless. This pattern is actually described in the clinical manual that professionals use to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder, which tells you how consistent and well documented it really is. Narcissists live inside a mental framework where they feel they need to be the best at absolutely everything, almost like a kind of magical thinking that shields them from ordinary limitations. So when they fail at something, even something small, it can feel to them like their entire world is collapsing around them. They genuinely struggle to process that kind of moment in a healthy way, which is exactly why conversations about their losses or failures tend to go absolutely nowhere productive. It is another clear window into how fragile their sense of self actually is beneath the surface. They will quickly brush off anything that threatens the idea that they are flawless and untouchable, sometimes within seconds of the topic coming up. Because they view themselves so highly, admitting to a mistake feels almost physically impossible for them, since it would mean accepting insisting they are not perfect after all, a thought that seems to genuinely destabilize them. So expect deflection, a sudden change of subject, or the conversation getting steered somewhere else entirely and rather abruptly, often toward whatever makes them look good again. These are their default moves whenever the topic gets too close to something they genuinely cannot face directly, and you will likely notice the same handful of tactics repeating themselves each time. The fourth thing narcissists genuinely struggle with is anything that stirs up feelings of shame or vulnerability in them. These individuals will go to extreme lengths to protect their fragile sense of self from ever being fully seen. Internally, there is a constant tug of war happening between a frightened, vulnerable side and the strong, confident image they work so hard to project outward to the world. On one hand, they put enormous, near-constant effort into appearing sure of themselves to everyone around them, almost like a performance that never gets to end. Underneath that performance, though, they are quietly carrying a scared, insecure version of themselves that rarely gets any room to breathe or be acknowledged. Maintaining that outward image takes constant, exhausting effort on their part, even if it looks effortless from the outside. Dealing with a covert narcissist, especially in a professional setting, adds an entirely different layer of complexity to all of this. They might play the victim or act unusually kind and understanding on the surface, all while quietly holding on to resentment underneath and knowing exactly how to use it against you later when it benefits them. It is also important to understand that these individuals will go to great lengths to avoid anything that makes them feel shame or weakness, even when doing so means hurting the people closest to them in the process without much apparent remorse. On top of all this, their relationships and their ability to genuinely connect with people over the long term tend to suffer significantly because of this constant internal conflict. If you have ever watched someone like this struggle socially or seen them unable to hold on to a meaningful long-term relationship despite clearly wanting one, feel free to share that experience in the comments below this video, since it can be validating to know you are not the only one who has noticed this pattern up close. The fifth and final area that gives narcissists real trouble is their relationships and their social skills more broadly across the board. These individuals are so wrapped up in themselves and their self-esteem is so fragile underneath the surface that even the smallest hint of criticism can send them spiraling into a defensive reaction. Building genuine, balanced relationships with other people becomes incredibly difficult for them because those relationships require a give and take they are rarely capable of sustaining. They cannot tolerate feedback, criticism, or even the gentlest suggestion that they might not be perfect in some area of their life. It is almost as if they are completely unable to show any weakness or admit to feeling shame at all, even in private with people who care about them. Because of that, they will go to extreme lengths to avoid those situations entirely, even if it means hurting the people closest to them along the way in the process. So be ready for a strong, often disproportionate reaction if you ever bring up the subject of their social skills or relationship patterns directly. Their response typically involves lying, gaslighting, projecting blame, and shaming, all used as tools to manipulate you and pull you back into line with whatever they want from the interaction. So to bring it all together, there are 5 areas that narcissists consistently struggle to face with any real honesty: the truth itself, giving credit to other people, dealing with failure or loss, confronting shame or vulnerability, and looking clearly at their own social skills and patterns. Bring up any of these 5 topics with someone like this, and do not expect a straightforward, honest answer in return. Instead, prepare yourself for evasive responses and a familiar set of manipulation tactics, things like gaslighting, lying, projecting, blaming, and shaming, often all within the same conversation. Their real goal in all of it is to knock you off balance and keep you feeling unsure of your own perception of events. This becomes especially obvious when you are dealing with a narcissist, since they tend to divide the world into allies and enemies with very little middle ground. The moment they sense you are no longer fully on their side, they may push back against you again and again, testing to see if you will fold. What they are really trying to do, whether they realize it consciously or not, is shake your grip on reality and make you feel like you are losing control of the situation entirely. But do not worry too much about that, because there are ways to protect yourself, and we have got you covered here. Feel free to check out the free course linked below, since I genuinely think you will find it useful in navigating relationships like this one, whether you are currently in the middle of one or trying to make sense of one from your past. And please share your own experiences with these kinds of behaviors in the comments section, since many of you have likely dealt with a narcissist at some point in your life, whether in a family, a friendship, a workplace, or a romantic relationship, and hearing from each other can be its own kind of support. To everyone watching, stay strong and remember that today is a great day to keep working toward becoming the best, most grounded version of yourself, one honest conversation and one steady boundary at a time. I will see you in the next video. If you would like more content like this, do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, and let the healing journey continue at your own pace without rushing yourself through it. Until next time.